Okay, we're sitting here in beautiful little LakeWales, Florida. Just a little town in America. And at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday and on a Thursday, I sit here in a cafe and bookstore for an hour. And I've spent the past 30 years dealing with a very difficult atmosphere, an atmosphere called Judeo Christianity. And the study of the afterlife and the spirit realm. Now, I am a former anti religious, anti Christian bigot. I did not like the religious stuff. I would hang out and dabble with some people a little bit. I didn't hate them, but I didn't have, I was having my personal adventures. And then at a certain moment, April 1994, I was arrested by a tiny little piece of eloquent writing that was quite nice that just said, hey, it looks like there's only one human being in all human history who has 200 to 300 predictions set in writing stretched across 1,000 years, written by 30 people that didn't know each other. And all these predictions point to an event, and the event is not a government, it's not a war, it's not an ice age, it's not global warming, it's not an earthquake. It's just one little person. And the person doesn't even travel the world. The person travels around in an area about the size of New Jersey, which is very small. And the person becomes famous for being able to send spirits away from crazy people. Do you know that Jesus was first famous and people were starting to flock to him because he had power to deal with spirit beings that were affecting human minds, emotions, and, personalities. So he's first famous for being able to deal with individual invisible spirit beings in the spirit realm that are affecting and causing difficulties for humans. And he's also really well known for walking into town and literally, well, the accounts say, if you believe the Bible's a fairy tale, you're welcome to, because I thought that for a long time. But in the accounts, it says he went into town, they laid out all of their sick, and he healed all of them. And then he traveled into another town, and the same thing happened again. He healed the whole hospital in a town until he has like 5 to 10,000 people following him out into the stinking desert, leaving behind their homes and their goats and all this other kind of stuff. They're following him because they feel that he has some kind of supernatural alignment with, the other realm. And so, anyhow, that was my transition. Reading about the fact that the Hebrew scriptures hold these predictions, and therefore there's a bubble or a presence or a spirit or an entity or a power over the Hebrew scriptures. And then the other literary miracle is that the Koine Greek New Testament. Now, don't get all fussy and say, oh, Rome and Constantine changed the New Testament, or King James changed the New Testament. The Koine Greek, the original Greek New Testament writings, that one little set of writings, is the most duplicated piece of literature from before the printing press in the whole world. There are like 3 copies of Socrates and like 5 copies of Plato from ancient age. But there's close to 3,000 copies of this Koine Greek. The word koine is a type of Greek lettering, where the language, there's no punctuation, there's no commas or periods or exclamation points. It's only capital letters. There's no upper and lower case. Koine Greek is a very, very basic language that was the business language of the entire world. Now, this is not something that I knew. I learned this when I was like almost, I started to learn this when I was almost 40 years old. And I became amazed because the Koine Greek New Testament, it's almost like there was some kind of crazy supernatural duplicating machine. I mean, people were copying this Koine Greek New Testament for hundreds of years. And there's copies everywhere, China, Africa, all over, from an ancient time, from before the printing press. Now, you know that the Chinese were the first to use movable stamps that had Chinese characters on it. They were the first printers. But then when Gutenberg set up the machinery to make lines of type, that was the first printing press. And then after the printing press, there's thousands of copies of Socrates and thousands of copies of Plato and thousands of copies of the Koine Greek New Testament. But it's amazing to discover the simple archaeological proof that somehow that New Testament writing had some kind of bubble of duplication inspiration on it. And I like to say it's a problem because most of the stuff in the New Testament was written 50 to 90 years after Yeshua was gone. So how can you possibly have a person 50? Can you imagine, like, I die and 50 years later, somebody's trying to sit down and write about stuff that Grandpa Honesty Guy did? That's ridiculous. How can they possibly remember 50 years later? That is like just absurd. But I tell you the truth. The same entity or power or spirit that caused all of those predictions to be set in place across 1,000 years or more in the Hebrew scriptures could also grab one little set of people in a certain age and have them make true accounts of the stuff of Jesus of Nazareth and his first sent ones, his first apostles. It's very interesting. It's very interesting because the first peoples to get the supernatural powers of Jesus, I mean, these people were raising the dead, driving out bad spirits, healing the sick, and just traveling around and willing to be tortured and killed because they're delighted that they finally know the afterlife and they've been directly befriended by God and they're caring for the human family. And they are not prideful and self-exalting, and they're gathering little groups of people. They're gathering little groups of people in homes to have these closed truth meal times where they come together and they share the things that are on their heart, the things that the Holy Spirit has revealed to them, and even the troubles that they've done or caused or the anxieties that they have. And then they take this communion meal and they declare, by my faith, this is the body and blood of Yeshua, unifying us with him and us with one another in a closed meeting of the closest friends who truly know and care for one another. And it's the men who are admitting their faults. The women and the children are not responsible to do that in the more public gathering. It's the men that show that they're willing to be completely honest about their behavior and their misbehavior. It's amazing. So, I mean, for 300 years, all the meetings were only in homes. And they had two kinds of meetings. They had public meetings where they would invite people into banquets and they would sit together and treat everyone like family. And they would have meetings in, public places like parks and marketplaces and down by the river where they're doing the laundry and stuff like that. They would have conversations and teachings and meetings in public places. But I'm telling you, the core group of the closest friends met and locked the doors to have their supernatural connection time, which is also the time of supernatural guidance and revelations from God. Okay, God, should our friend marry this person that they are interested in? Can you show us whether this is a happy thing and a safe thing? And everyone asks together. And it's literally the new mercy seat, the new Holy of Holies. I'm an entrepreneur, man. I want my decisions to be made with, supernatural eternal friend guidance, not just my own dopey ideas. And so my first trouble when I discovered that, you know, Jesus is really the supernatural visitor and the Bible is a supernatural gift touch. Now, there's wisdom in everything. There is wisdom and spiritual revelation in every corner of the human existence. But the two big shows of the spirit that caused the universe to exist, the two big shows are the rescuing of 3 to 12 million Israelite slaves, the Exodus. They had been in slavery for over 400 years. They got out of Egypt without a war. And the understanding and the recording of that event, of them staying alive in a desert for 40 years, is amazing. So that's show number one of the creator of God. And show number two is the coming of this Jesus of Nazareth, supernatural Messiah character, who has all these predictions. Over 200 predictions all point to his tiny little life in a certain point in the human calendar. And he also shows that he can come back from the dead. He reveals himself in his resurrection form across 40 days to many people, and then 500 people at once when he ascends into the clouds. Now, that might sound like an interesting fairy tale that's not true, that people believe. And, if it's not true, who cares? But if he really did come back from the dead, we should probably figure out what he said and take a couple steps back and respect that maybe the spirit that set the predictions in the Hebrew scriptures also guided the words of the Koine Greek New Testament, which is the most famous and most duplicated book in human history from before the printing press. This is a library point. This is an amazing library point. I'm a bookish person. This is the book. So anyhow, with all that stuff aside, I'm having fun sitting down here making a list of all of the nasty things that have happened in the lineage of Christianity. I mean, there's a bunch of things that are just plain awful. There are deceptive teachers. There are hurtful Christians. And the concept of a closed communion meeting of happy friends with women and men and children, everyone together in a state of ecstasy. This whole closed communion meeting where we hear from God and interact with God. This whole concept of the closed communion meeting, it's lost, it's removed, it's missing, it's forgotten. And these meetings were not in auditoriums. They were in somebody's home. So, stay tuned and KATHRYN'S bookstore in LakeWales, Mondays at 10 o'clock a.m., and Thursdays at 10 o'clock a.m., we will hit a Bible study topic. And I'm working on a list of topics. One of those topics is the deceptive teachers, the hurtful things in Christianity, and the concept of the closed communion meeting. Those are 3 things. And then I love to do the Bible study of all the people who came back from the dead in the Bible, because there's like 11 different places where some wild stuff happened. I mean, if it's all a fairy tale, who cares? But even if it's a fairy tale, it's very interesting to read about human beings coming back from the dead. And I am a person who has actually been involved with and has been carrying stories of people who have come back from the dead, and I share them on the internet. It's pretty cool to actually have a supernatural restoration of a dead person. That's kind of groovy. So contact me if you want to hang out, if you got questions, and if you want to start a safe communion group with a group of brothers in your home, or at least with your family, please, you're welcome to contact me. All the best. Doink.